Alright, we're going to look at linear equations, and we're just going to look at a couple different forms that they'll come in, and we can graph a few of them just so we get an idea what we're talking about. A linear equation is going to be any equation that forms a straight line. So linear, line, obviously you can see the correlation there. When we're looking at a linear equation, two of these three examples are linear equations. Any linear equation is going to have two different variables, typically an x and a y, and those variables are going to be raised to an exponent with a power of 1, basically, which means we got y to the first, or we've got x to the first power, which means we've got y and we have x. We typically don't write the exponent of a 1, but we do need to know that it is there. So if we look at our first example, I've got y equals 2x plus 1. So I've got my two variables, my y and my x, and they're both in the form y to the first and x to the first. So yes, first one, that would be a linear equation. Second one now you can see is 5x equals 6 plus 3y. So our x and our y switched which side of the equation they're on, which really doesn't make a difference in this case. We're just looking at the equations and the variables themselves to see which power they're raised to. We can see x and y are both being raised to that assumed first power, so that one is in fact a linear equation as well. The third one, you can see I have a y squared here. Since y squared is not y to the first power, that will not be a linear equation. So we see these x and y's have to be raised to just the first power. And now these linear equations can be written in multiple different forms. The form that we are most accustomed to is this y equals mx plus b form. And that is when m is equal to the slope of our line and the b is equal to the y-intercept. Now another form that we don't see quite as much is going to be the point slope form, which means that I have a point, which would be x1, y1, and I can plug that point into a point slope formula where I would put my x1 here. So I would have my slope times x minus x1, and I'd have my y-intercept right here. So essentially it would simplify to give us something along the lines of y equals m times x minus x1 plus y1, which you can see is very similar to this slope equation. We have our y equals m, we got our b in here. The only difference would be this now changes from x to x minus x1. So it changes a little bit, makes it a little bit more of a complicated formula, but still something that we can manage. Now if we look at y equals 3x plus 2, we can see this one is in y equals mx plus b formula. And my corresponding values for m, anything that we're multiplying x by, in this case would be a 3. And my value for b is going to be that extra constant that we're not multiplying by x, is going to be a 2. If we looked at it real quick and we wanted to graph it, I could graph it quite simply by taking my y-intercept, which is going to be this 2 here. Y-intercept is where it crosses that y-axis. That would be my y-intercept. My slope I can write as 3 over 1, which is my rise over my run. So I'm going to rise 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to run 1, and I can make a point. And then anytime we have 2 points, let me get rid of this, hopefully. Anytime I have 2 points, I can connect them with a relatively straight line. So this would essentially be the graph of y equals 3x plus 2. Plus 2, up 3 over 1, that's what it would look like. Last one we want to look at, you can see the graphs there off to the right. When we look at something like this, we've got our x and our y on the same side of the equal sign. We know generally when we're talking about graphs of linear equations, we want to get it into the form of y equals mx plus b, which means we want to solve for this y and get this y alone. If I look at that, it's really going to be a two-step process here. First thing I have to do is get rid of this minus 4x. To get rid of that minus 4x, all I have to do is add 4x to both sides. So I'll have 2y is going to be equal to 2 plus 4x. Then my last step here would be to get rid of this 2. To get rid of that 2, I can divide by 2 because it's going to cancel it out. Then over here I can divide everything by 2. So I would be left with just y over here equals 2 divided by 2 is going to give me a 1. 4x divided by 2 is going to give me a positive 2x. And if I look at this, I've got my b value, which is a 1. I've got my m, which is a 2. So my y-intercept, which is my b value, would be positive 1. My slope would be 2 over 1, which means I'm going to go up 2 over 1. And I've got a line there that would be my line of y equals 1 plus 2x. And just in case there's any confusion there, we can rewrite this as y equals 2x plus 1. So we have our m coming first. So we have our mx plus b. And you can switch around however you want, but that's the general idea of linear equations and how to graph a line.